Welcome to Through the Glass Columns, your weekly Wheel of Time read along podcast. The Wheel of Time turns and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again.
That is your host, Greg, who somehow still knows very little about the Wheel of Time, even though he usually pretends otherwise.
And that is Tylor, our resident expert, who makes sure you know how much he knows about the Wheel of Time.
It's a lot. Join us each week as we continue our journey through Robert Jordan's great fantasy epic, exploring the books, the television show, ill-advised discussions of visual media on a non-visual podcast, and so much more. Although actually not, it's just that.
Yes, all that and actually nothing else as we travel on, and I know what this means now, through the glass columns.
Yeah, he really doesn't know all that much.
No, you don't know that much.
Well, look what you found. It's another episode of Through the Glass Columns, your weekly read-along Wheel of Time podcast. I'm surprised to see you around these parts. And my name is Greg, your host who knows very little, including how to finish this bit. Joining me is Tylor, who knows a lot and will finish this bit by just getting down to normal business. Tylor, how's it going?
Just to be clear, I don't see any of you because this is a podcast, and that's not how they work. I'm doing very well. I thought that we had two chapters that moved the ball along, and sometimes that's all that chapters need to do. But I kind of had a good time with all of it, except a little bit, but we'll deal with that in the second chapter. I thought that this was a good opportunity to kind of get into some of the nitty-gritty of a plot line that we've been excited to see where it goes, but now feels a little bit stalled out. Was that your feeling as well? Like, not much moved, but I could feel the beginnings of momentum, right? Like, this is the top of the hill if we're going back to our old favorite roller coaster metaphor.
Well, and I think I'm plagiarizing myself from last week, but I'll add the word stagnant to it. And it feels like our characters are in that mid-summer, although it's November, stagnation that happens in like heavy oppressive heat, right? That like,
Yeah.
I don't want to move anything. I'm a little crabby about everything. I just want to just sit here until sundown and use that little bit of cool to get done a minimal amount of work. So it does feel like these characters are not, incapable of action, but certainly are just kind of being held in a tension that isn't releasing yet.
So let me ask you one more question before we get down to our just general overview that will probably take way too long for this first chapter. How are you feeling on the Nynaeve is beaten down meter? Because I think you can either read these chapters as frustrations kind of piling up on Nynaeve, or you can read them as Nynaeve actually remarkably, compared to a couple of chapters ago, navigating situations relatively well. Are you worried about her the way you were before, or is it a different kind of worry now?
So my first note on my page, spoiler, usually I save this for after the summary, is can't we just get Nynaeve a win? And I would use that to answer your question, because I think you're right to characterize it as she feels like she's more in control and not just kind of accepting the blows of life, but is starting to plan how to stop getting, I was going to say blown, but let's say hit with blows. And so I think that means I see it as an uptick, but it really is still like I just want her to get a win. And I would say my summation of the first chapter is a bunch more blows, but then, there's a little sparkle of some new plot that's going to take her away from all this.
And that sparkle of new plot will materialize into an actual plot in, I don't know, like 5 to 100 weeks. That seems to be how Robert Jordan works. But for this week, we'll begin with a summary of Chapter 13, under the dust. Nynaeve recovers after Theodrin has tested whether a splash of cold water will break her block. It didn't, and apparently Nynaeve was so upset about it that she slapped Theodrin over it, and now both of them have bruises, which is unsurprising. She channels herself dry, leaving a puddle on the ground, and then Nynaeve admits that she struggles to surrender, and Theodrin says it shouldn't be theoretically possible to channel without surrendering. At this point, she starts guiding Nynaeve through meditation, kind of the basic ones that we've learned from the White Tower, and Nynaeve seems frustrated but wants it to work desperately. They work for hours with seemingly no success, and eventually they heal each other of their bruises, and Nynaeve thinks that Theodrin is extremely stubborn, which I wrote lol next to it because it's Nynaeve thinking that. Once she leaves, Nynaeve spots Tarna, the representative of the Red Ajah, who seems to be getting a cold reception from those in Saladar. Nynaeve heads to her room where Elaine has had a very difficult day with the Aes Sedai, particularly making terrible mistakes working with Terangriel. Nynaeve asks after Moghedien and then says that they should leave as soon as possible the way that Moghedien suggested. Nynaeve lays out her arguments based on Merrigan's children and also the Little Tower planning to delay, but Elaine thinks that their best course is actually to stay in Saladar and try to influence the Little Tower as much as possible. It's noted then whether it's basically a debate then about whether or not this is possible, and then at this point Tarna enters unexpectedly. She says that they would be raised to the White Tower if they return, and then she requests to speak to the Wilder alone. Tarna shares that she had a block as well, which was painfully beaten out of her by the head of the Red Ajah, and she says that Nynaeve and Egwene are crucial to Elida's plans, and she says that Elida intends to guide Rand when asked, but Nynaeve denies being able to help with that in any way. She warns Nynaeve against Suan and Lyanna and tells her to think about leaving with her when she heads out, and Elaine eventually returns once Tarna leaves with the Dream Terangriel. Nynaeve tries to get them to run, but Elaine is more convinced than ever that they need to push the tower to ally with Rand rather than reuniting with the tower. They wait until night, noting that Gareth Bryne is still waiting outside the tower, and then they enter Teleron Riod, agreeing to look for something that could be helpful in their ability to influence the tower's decision. Nynaeve worries that she'll be spotted by a sitter in Teleron Riod and is surprisingly dressed up. She kind of surprises herself with that detail. They close their eyes and focus on need, and they arrive surrounded by buildings and eventually realize they are in Tarvalon near the docks. They shift again inside of the tower, where they briefly spot Egwene, who vanishes from their sight. They debate whether it was actually her, and then leap again to a collection of Terangriel and Sa'angriel in the tower. They decide this room is not in any way accessible to them in the waking world, and so they need to try to find something else. They eventually shift to another city and realize that it is Ibu Dar, before eventually ending up in a storehouse that is stuffed with items. They shift one more time and find a beautifully decorated bowl, which Elaine realizes can fix the weather, and then they realize the whole room is a treasure full of magic items, both Terangriel and Angriel, and they try to identify where they are so they can find this room in the real world, but the best they're able to make out is that they are in a very maze-like region of the city of Ibu Dar, and Elaine then says that Nynaeve would like Ibu Dar because wise women have an enormous amount of power there. Eventually the girls wake and debate whether knowing about the bowl will change anything for the Little Tower, and then Nynaeve remembers Theodrin and doesn't go to sleep after Elaine does, thinking that she will be very happy to break her block, but she is silently crying about something that she has experienced that night. This is a chapter where we get a hint at something and also some character work. What was your thought on chapter 13?
Well, as nobody knows, my first thought was, can't Nynaeve just get a win? Because just to give a little more detail to that now, I do think that in all these cases, it's like she's just done in so many, she's done with trying to get through the block. She's done with the kind of, she's even kind of done with Elaine, right? She's like not here for Elaine's complaining, even though they seem legitimate, right? They're not like spoiled princess concerns.
One of the concerns was a giant ball of fire that caused burns that were too severe for Elaine, a very powerful channeler, to heal, just to be clear.
And so I think it felt very like fulfilling to see them get a direction, right? And
Yeah.
you know, I actually just had this experience. I started a new video game, and there's always that moment. You do the tutorial, and then whatever kind of opening cutscene happens, and then you get like, okay, here's your first mission. It's like so clearly stated, like, go here, get this thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was playing an Indiana Jones video game. So then I got a little map with a red line that moved and then an airplane. So it's exactly like that. It's like I'm ready to cut to that map as they make their way slowly to Abu Dar. So my other big moment in my notes was then to flip open the map and say, where are we going? And prior to the turning of the page, I had assumed, I was like, oh, I bet we're going up kind of where we know Perrin is and Fail, and where kind of Morghese seems to be kind of over that way. Like, whoa, maybe we'll bring everybody together up in that.
Morghese is a bit more south than the rest of them, but yeah, absolutely, that general
kind
direction.
Of right on the crease of the page in the map, kind of up in there. And that's entirely wrong. We're pretty close to the crease, but we're way down. This is if Falme, sorry, I forgot the name of it, was the manhood of this continent. This is like hidden second manhood down at the bottom. It's a little peninsula, way down low on the fold of the page, but as south as you can get, except for Ilion on the part of the map we can see, really.
If you are the most easily offended person I've ever heard, cover up your ears so I don't need to do an explicit tag. But it's the balls of the continent.
Yes, that's on their tourism posters, right? That's the
that's the slogan. That's on every sign when you're driving into Abu Dar. You're absolutely correct. I thought that the beginning of this chapter, and then a detail that I will actually pull from the end of the chapter, makes me have kind of a lingering question about of Nynaeve and Theodrin and their interactions to try to break Nynaeve's bond. Because the examples of a bond being broken that we've gotten so far are like, I could only channel around men who I found attractive, and so we broke the bond by having like a secret woman in the room who I thought was an attractive man. And then we get a second example that is just like, apparently you can just beat someone until they are so broken that whatever was blocking them, it won't be blocking them anymore. Theodrin seems to be trying all sorts of different techniques, everything from meditation to splashes of water. What do you think Nynaeve needs to be able to break this block of only being able to channel when she's angry? Because it feels like we're trying all the weird tricks, and so something's got to work eventually.
Yeah, I would summarize everything you just said to say that we're meant to understand that this is a psychological block, right? Yeah. That however this has occurred to all these different characters, it's a mental problem, not an actual physical problem or anything like that. And so all of those tricks sound like, you know, kind of in our world, how you trick somebody into doing something, you know, you can kind of get around a psychological block. I don't think those are recommended by any psychologist. I think they're, you know, especially the beating.
Just to be clear, like cognitive behavioral therapy is basically lying to yourself until your brain believes it. So you're not entirely wrong.
Yeah. And so as I look at Nynaeve, to answer your actual question, to me, it seems like it's a confidence issue, right? That she has been beaten down and is kind of used to a lesser role now and just has to start to feel like she matters and that she's strong. So I don't know how you give confidence to somebody unless you're the Wizard of Oz handing it to, I guess that was courage, right? And nobody got confidence in Wizard of Oz. But giving like just that trait to somebody. But, you know, could it be that she needs to accidentally channel and that will allow her to know that she has the ability, right? Actually, just to make sure I do a pop culture reference to stay on brand, it's a little bit like Harry Potter in the Patronus. He didn't know he could do the Patronus till he time traveled and saw himself do it. So then he knew he could do it back in the past or in the future or whichever. So like I feel like you need to find a way to make it clear to her she's very powerful somehow, and then she'll just know she can do that very powerful thing.
Have you read the 8th book in the Dark Tower series, the weird like interlude that he wrote years later? I think there may actually be a character who gets from a wizard that is not technically in Oz confidence or something like it in a Stephen King book. You may be almost right.
I definitely read all those books, but they all blurred together after a certain point, and it was a long time ago.
That's absolutely valid.
Yeah.
Excellent. The one moment here that I thought was... Oh, no, that was in the next chapter. There's not very many interesting moments here. I thought that Tarna's arrival was really what shook this up. I think we kind of talked about the Nynaeve dynamic and the Theodrin stuff before, but Tarna arriving, made it really clear how much Elida is focused on these two individuals, even though they are not Aes Sedai. And also, I think it was really interesting just to see how much, after seeing Nynaeve get grilled by the Saladar Aes Sedai in the previous chapter, to see how much Elida's faction seems to be following the same playbook in trying to get Nynaeve on their side because of her potential influence over Rand.
Really liked that this was kind of, it wasn't a win for Nynaeve, but it showed that she matters. And I'm not convinced she matters just because she grew up with Rand. Like, I think everybody might know she matters a little bit more for some reason. And I'm also thinking about the note from the last Rand chapter about how there's this motherlode of young, talented women in the Two Rivers, and that maybe Nynaeve is a part of that. Very interesting to put that knowledge that we have and these characters don't have alongside I've already forgotten her name, even though you just said
Tarna.
Tarna.
Tarna. I hope it's Tarna.
Tarna. Tarna saying that she's an untamed wildling, and that feels like an wilder, excuse me. It feels like an insult, and then she explains it's not intended as an insult. I'm one too, right? I can say that word because I'm one of them. Always works out well in society. But it felt really like there's a clue being dropped there that these characters can't perceive, and that maybe we're supposed to from jumping between these plot lines.
Yeah, there's something really interesting about that character essentially admitting, like, I have been through the worst thing you can imagine to break the block, and you should too. Like, it's a very odd contrast that I think makes me very curious about that character, and also I think, as you're kind of alluding to, like, what does it mean to be a wilder in the tower is still something that is very unclear. We don't know how deep the biases go and how much it's forgotten once your block is broken. But for Nynaeve right now, it certainly seems to be the focus of what she's dealing with in the little tower. Any last thoughts on that or on the debate up between Elaine and Nynaeve about whether they should run away before we basically jump into the dream?
Just say, because I have to delay getting to the dream because I don't want to go there.
Yeah, that's your
job. I would just say it was striking to me how much Tarna just assumed, like, and you'll be with me in the morning, and, like, you know, and then even when Nynaeve's like, no, I've made up my mind, Tarna's like, think about it a little bit more, and it just felt like a little something more than just like persuasion. This wasn't just Tarna. It felt like Tarna knew something or could sense something about Nynaeve and really truly believes she'll come with her to the tower. I'm not saying that is going to happen. I'm just saying that I think Tarna believes it will. Is that naivety about these people being so far from listening to the tower anymore, or assuming that what they want more than anything is the title Aes Sedai, perhaps, so they would go follow that trail. But I especially by the end of this chapter, I think they're headed the other direction, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, is that what Tarna identifies with, I believe it was Galena, who was the one who broke her block, is that Galena identified very early that Tarna would be a Red Ajah, and so she kind of took her under her wing. And so there's a part of me that wonders here if part of what is happening is this is Tarna kind of offering the Red Ajah olive branch to Nynaeve. And I think aside from the fact that she loves Lan, which obviously they wouldn't know about, I think she kind of fits the profile otherwise in a lot of ways, right? Yellow obviously makes a lot of sense for Nynaeve because she's a healer, but if you had to pick a secondary for her, I don't think red is out of line for that character. And so I wonder if that's part of what's going on in terms of that subtext you're identifying, because you're right, there's definitely something going on there kind of behind the scenes.
Well, it was Galena, but then the goat couldn't pronounce it, so it became Glena, right? Sorry. That's
Nice
a wicked
work.
joke. Well, and yeah, so as you were just saying that, kind of like with Slytherin and Harry Potter, you're like, what are you talking about, Tyler? Reds are all evil. Like, they're no.
Right.
But you're right. Like, her frustration with Rand and the boys and kind of the way she was such a prominent, powerful woman in the Two Rivers kind of fits with the ethos of the Red Ajah, and it wouldn't be a terrible question.
Yeah.
And, well, it's the green who can have multiple partners, but, Red seems to want to control a man, and doesn't she just want to control Lan and draw him back and so on? But, she's kind of so frustrated that Lan is outside of her control. It doesn't really, it doesn't really fit the pattern, but it also doesn't not fit the pattern there. To the dream.
In the dream, I basically have two notes. And the first one is what is going on with this first set of jumps the girls make. They end up in Tar Valon in the basement of the tower, and they basically decide, like, well, we can't get here, no need to investigate. And in my head, I'm like, no, investigate. You are legitimately thinking, what could we do to help the little tower make its decision? And then you just didn't look. And so what I'm left to wonder is, what was Tel'aran'rhiod's sense of need tugging them towards? Because the things that we are aware of being in the basement of the tower are like Sa'angreal and Angreal. We know that's where the Horn of Valir is. I believe that is where the knife that infected Matt from Shadar Lagoth is. And that's about it as far as the things we know are there. Now, there's almost certainly a lot of Ter'angreal, and those can all be unique, and maybe one of them would be useful, but I'm really left at the kind of middle of this chapter wondering, like, whoa, I think we have ignored a giant clue, and we don't have enough pieces to really put it together.
Well, and I want to yes and that comment by noting that I was struck by the fact that this seemed like a big power upgrade, right? The ability to just kind of go to Tel'aran'rhiod and be like, tell us what we need, and kind of jump anywhere seemed hugely powerful, right? Like,
yeah,
that
so
there's power to that.
Yeah, so we had this a couple books ago, and the weakness in theory was you kind of need to jump blind, and so people could set traps for you where you are. But either the girls are unaware of this, or are at this point just not afraid of Forsaken traps, which I think you're right, they should be.
Well, and so then to the point where you're jumping to the most powerful, it did feel like it took a lot out of them and it was disorienting, but it felt like, I immediately started imagining how else could you use this, right? And yeah. Obviously we've known for a while that they could jump kind of to their friends, essentially, or to meeting places and things they want to spy on. But to go from, like, I want to see what's on the Amerlin Seat's desk to take me somewhere that shows me the most powerful thing right now felt like, wow, this could be startling in its ramifications.
You are now thinking like Brandon Sanderson, who in every one of his books is like, let me establish a very logical magical system and then push it to its extremes. I don't think that's quite the game Robert Jordan often plays, but he does enough that we should be asking these questions.
But who finishes the books, Tyler? Who finishes the books? Yeah, go ahead.
You're not wrong. So if that is kind of the lingering question at the end of the chapter, the big dangling hint, we've already identified Ibudar, but it's worth noting the item that is bringing them there is a bowl with a bunch of images of clouds that seems to, at least according to Elaine, be able to fix the weather. And if part of the problem we've been having with all of the characters in Saladar is just how much the heat is causing everything to boil over, boy, does this kind of seem like what they need at this moment.
It seems, to go back to my word stagnation, it seems like everybody could use it, and this would kind of allow people to start moving their plot line. So looking at us approaching the middle of the book, getting there, not quite there.
Past the third.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense as a kind of plot device to kind of accelerate everybody, right? If they went and fixed this, and then everybody could kind of rush into the final third, perhaps, kind of ready to go. But they make it sound awful easy. Like, yes, it's tricky in that the other limitation is they don't actually know where exactly they are, right? They can't determine quite enough. So that's a limitation on this power. But it does feel like, that could potentially be a pretty easy way to get that pattern we used to see of the end of the book brings everybody kind of all climaxing at the same time. Didn't sound right, but you know what I mean.
No, that's not what we want to be describing. I really
was
don't
that
have too
other
much...
explicit tag. It's coming.
Yeah, there
this
it
week.
goes. It's over. You didn't even tell them to cover their ears, Craig. How will we avoid the explicit tag? So I don't really have too much else here other than to say I think Nynaeve is a little broken, and even she's not quite sure why at the end of this chapter, right? The silent cry is never a good sign. Yeah. Any last thoughts on this before we jump into kind of an unexpected, to me at least, POV switch?
Why, yes, Tyler. Can we go back to the first page, if you don't mind?
Yes.
Why is this the chapter icon? Is the one other note in my notes. Sorry, I stumbled to find the same word. Right?
It's because they used the ring that is depicted in that chapter icon to enter Teleron Riode.
I thought we associated this symbol with like the Forsaken in some way, didn't we?
There is another very similar symbol, and I believe this has also been associated in the past with Lanfear when she was primarily interacting with Teleron Riode. So that may be where that connection comes from. But this is similar to, but not the same as, the Forsaken symbol, which I think we had the chapter before. Chapter 13 is probably the closest to it. But
flipping. Nope, this is chapter 13.
Oh, then I don't know, the one. Oh, no, you're right. I was looking at chapter 14. Chapter 13 is an odd symbol for this. You are correct.
Yes. Mark it down, everybody. That's the first time I was right. Thank you.
I think that in addition to the Forsaken, this is also very much our, backroom dealing evil people politics. And so my guess would be this is Tarna, and the White Tower politics would be our best example of this. But no, you're right. Sorry, I looked at the wrong chapter icon.
Perfect. All right. That's all I had. Onward.
To chapter 14, Dreams and Nightmares. Egwene flees the dream upon seeing Nynaeve and Elaine. She has been avoiding notice in Teleron Riode, and she wanders the space between the dreams, thinking of how much she has learned on her own as she's been recovering from the damage she took at the end of the last book in the battle with Lanfear. She is frustrated that the Wise Ones keep slowing her down in her learning, and she spots Berelane's dreams but stays far away because the last time she visited, it was kinda dirty, and she also sees Rand's dreams, which are warded, and she wonders how Rand manages to move around so quickly and get from city to city. She worries that the Wise Ones could be looking for her dream at the moment because she is supposed to be sleeping normally rather than being in Teleron Riode. She's been trying to spy while not being noticed by anyone, and she has seen a couple of women regularly, and she worries that they are Forsaken, who seem to be spending significant amounts of time in the dream in both Caemlyn and Cairhien, which is potentially worrisome. One of the dreams that is in the nearby area begins to attract Egwene, even though it's not a familiar person, and she is eventually absorbed by that dream and finds herself tied up while Gawain battles off an evil-looking Rand so Gawain can rescue her. Egwene notes that Rand is kind of looking larger and more scary, and Gawain more handsome than in reality, and when she tries to get out of the dream, but every time she is swiftly swept up in Gawain's romantic fantasy, and she tries to deny the reality of it, but is just too caught up as Gawain views her as perfect, and this makes it kind of almost self-esteem raising in a way that makes it hard to resist. The dream resets every time that he says something silly or that he doesn't think is good enough, and eventually he declares his love for her in the perfect way, and she loses her fight to try to stay out of the dream and becomes lost, kissing him and other things potentially. We then switch into Nynaeve's POV, who decides to go for a walk to stay awake when she hears screams in the distance. Elaine joins her in the hallway, and a stool strikes Nynaeve, and then she says that it is a bubble of evil, and they run around to the house, waking people up as nearby blankets and kettles and other household objects begin to attack individuals. Once things are grabbed, however, they stop and begin acting normally. Once they get outside, there is bedlam with a large number of people being chased and not knowing what to do, and eventually the Aes Sedai Anaya arrives with a few other Aes Sedai and also some novices and accepted, and they are all linked together. They demand that Nynaeve and Elaine link with them so they can fight off the Forsaken. Nynaeve says that this is not the Forsaken, but Anaya insists. It is slightly difficult for Nynaeve to link, but eventually she is able to, and she notes both how in awe she is of how much she is channeling, and also the fact that she can loosely feel the other's emotions in the link, and she is at first amazed at the fact that she is able to continue channeling despite the fact that she's not angry, and then she worries because Elaine is about to join the link. Sorry, I keep trying not to say bond because that's for warders. She tries to join the link, and she worries about Elaine and potentially Moghedien joining because of the link with the Adom. They eventually are able to use their flows in order to bring down a large number of these kettles and other objects, but eventually Nicola, one of the individuals who is in the link, begins to speak without really knowing what she is saying, and it has the sound of prophecy. We will definitely be discussing this. At this point, the Anaya is able to basically end all of the problems because she is channeling so much and can handle all of the objects, and eventually Anaya seems almost disappointed but breaks the link, noting that this was not one of the Forsaken, seemingly. Nynaeve and Egwene argue that this was one of the bubbles of evil, but Elaine is told to help with the healing, and Nynaeve is told to go to sleep. When Nynaeve brings up their discovery in the world of dreams, she is told to talk about it tomorrow. Nynaeve wonders why Anaya was disappointed that this wasn't one of the Forsaken, and then resolves to sleep regardless of what Theodrin will think about it. So this is a chapter that I basically have two things to say about it, and the first half I have nothing to say. I kind of liked it. It's nice that we at least get a romance scene, even if it's imaginary, but that's the selling point. What did you think of Egwene in this chapter?
I mean, I really thought Egwene was saying, stop trying to make Galad and Gawain a thing, right? She's like, what? Like, and, you know, it's funny because, and this is a little crossing the streams, these characters just made their big entrance onto the TV show this season, and it was like everybody paused to see how awesome and beautiful they are. And I kind of like the idea that Egwene may just not be into all that. Like, it's just a distraction to her.
I mean, she's a little into it. She didn't get out of the dream.
True. But in that regard, you know, it's also funny. I thought if anything mattered, it was just that it was essentially the wrong boy, right? Or it teased that the two boys are going to be fighting over her in the future.
No, and I think that's right. This feels like an introduction to the mechanics of going into someone's dream, which I think is very valuable. I think it tells us a lot about how much Egwene has kind of leveled up in the meantime and how she feels like she's being held back, but she has clearly made enormous progress. And other than that, hinty, hinty, hint, romancy, romancy, romance, and we're out. This is a dream section, so I don't know how much you have to say about the dream itself, but what did you think of this seemingly new power of Egwene's, the ability to, as you were saying before, like jumping around and finding something that you need is valuable, but being able to spy on people's dreams feels really powerful. Rand can block it, but non-channelers seem not to be able to.
Well, and it is a dream, and clearly a dream, but it's funny because it's so much more felt like a fantasy, right? Like he was laying around imagining this. We're just edging towards that explicit tag, but I'll bounce back again and say, you know, this felt like...
Avoid the explicit tag. Don't talk about edging, Greg.
So we were getting close to something that felt more like he would be in control of this, and this would be his choices for that. Yeah. I mean, what it comes down to is it's probably just like a really awesome dream for him. Good for you, buddy. And so I thought that was a little interesting. Being able to spy on dreams, I think we talked about this before, this kind of way in which people pop in and out and you kind of get this vague sense of them. I think that does feel like it has a powerful set of consequences that could happen, and it probably will happen because it's been introduced in such silly ways, right?
Okay, yeah.
And I'm not thinking. I feel like there are some good pop culture comps to this, but the idea that you're kind of seeing people in this silly it's a little bit Everything Everywhere All at Once when she starts like giving them what they want and making everybody happy, and you just get these tiny vignettes about how somebody just wants a hug and somebody wants to be spanked and somebody like on, and it's kind of a little like that. You're seeing people completely unguarded, and so that silliness feels like it will lead to something portentous.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think the only other note I have here is that teenage me is also like Gawain in that the superpower I most would want is 3 tries when talking to a pretty girl. That would have made a huge difference for me in high school. Any last thoughts on this before I move on to what I find to be the more fun and interesting part of this chapter?
No, except that I want a little more for Egwene. Egwene is also starting to feel like a lost character because her kind of key role as a like communication point between is so muted and controlled right now. I'm starting to want a little more from her and from her plot line too.
I agree with that. Let's see if we get it. We won't in the next section because it's about Nynaeve. Honestly, a decent chunk of this section of the chapter is taken up with an action sequence that falls into our very typical things happened, and so we won't have much to say about it. But we had talked before about both how the Aes Sedai were seemingly preparing for the dangers of being surrounded by the White Cloaks and the Forsaken and what have you. And we see the effects of that plan here with Anaya able to link everyone together. But we've also talked about how much the Aes Sedai are ignoring Nynaeve and Elaine in their warnings. And that really bites them here with a bubble of evil being something they don't seem to be prepared for. So those are kind of the overarching themes that are really all I can say about the first maybe 5-10 pages of this chapter. What were your thoughts?
Just a stupid sidebar. I still don't like bubble of evil, right? Like,
I mean, it's better than taint.
But it just feels like, again, I get the larger metaphor, which is like there are essentially cracks between what is good and what is bad, and the bad things can come through the cracks, and that's, fissures of evil or something makes more sense. I mean, it just feels a little loopy and strange. I'm not in love with the phrasing, but as a plot device, I do kind of like it as a ticking clock of however fast or slow you're moving, this boundary is getting more porous, and it's just going to get more chaotic here in very unexpected ways.
Absolutely. I thought the moment where Nynaeve joins the link with all of these other Aes Sedai was really interesting. This is the first time that we've seen characters linked that are the POV involved. And the fact that Nynaeve is able to continue channeling despite not being angry was really fascinating to me. And then second, this idea that there is some sort of like emotional linkage, and that's why I'm trying to avoid the word bond, because the comparison I want to make is how similar is linking between Aes Sedai to the Warder bond, because that is something that we're very interested in now that Rand has had one foisted upon himself without his consent. So what were your thoughts on this kind of linking scene? It's the first time we've really seen a bunch of Aes Sedai band together to use this much of the power.
Well, actually, it didn't register to me as the first time because, again, crossing the stream, there's such a memorable scene from the television show of it. I found it easy to picture what was going on because of that. And I think where I land is trying to question what you just said of how much this is similar to the Bond. I mean, the Bond, we've talked about kind of emotions seeping through, but that seems very different than, really uniting. And I don't know. I don't have the right scientific language, but it seems like one is a resonance and the other's an amplification, of what's happening here. I don't know. There's something about sound waves, right? When the sound waves stack up kind of complementary to each other, it's all blanked out, but when they sync up, it really increases the peaks and valleys. It feels like the second one.
Exactly the same place with the vocabulary as you are right now. Yes, you are correct,
perfect.
and I like this metaphor, despite the fact that neither of us know exactly what the metaphor is.
Humanities Guide trying science. Here we go again.
Social scientist trying science, also ugly. So, I don't really have much else until Nicola speaks one of the more interesting bits of prophecy that we have gotten thus far. Do you have any other thoughts before we dive into something that I had to text you about earlier to make sure I wouldn't spoil anything for the audience?
No, I think let's unpack the prophecy and what I should have learned from it, because I feel like I didn't learn much.
What I want to do is do this in 3 stages. Stage 1 is I read the prophecy so we all know what we are talking about. Stage 2 is I get your thoughts based on just like looking at it in the book or hearing it. And then 3 is I have a couple of additions that I can't really say much about, but I want to see if they spark anything in you. In my edition of the book, this is on page 340. It's about 2 pages before the end of the chapter. Suddenly Nicola spoke, sounding half asleep. The lion sword, the dedicated spear, she who sees beyond. 3 on the boat, and he who is dead yet lives. The great battle done, but the world not done with battle. The land divided by the return, and the guardians balance the servants. The future teeters on the edge of a blade. So, I want to start just with that. What are your thoughts? Is there anything that sparks here? Is there anything that you have an idea of what it might mean? And what are your kind of thoughts without me giving any commentary?
So, what stands out, I'll just kind of go in order. So, lion sword stands out because we are used to the heron sword, right? The heron blade. So it was interesting to me that that's seemingly a different sword or a different person. The dedicated spear, I went to Avienda, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of dedicated spear-wielding person dedicated to Rand. So is the lion sword, is that Rand? Is this Avienda? And then the woman who sees beyond, she who sees beyond, feels like Min, right? Mm-hmm. And we've discussed how those 3 characters might be in a positive thruple, right? In their lives, or
I believe
sharing.
Quadruple was actually
with Elaine, yeah, right. And so it doesn't seem like Elaine is in that list unless we have yet to learn something about a sword she has with a lion, or I've forgotten something about it.
I will note that I do not have anything to give you. The lion is the symbol of the Royal House of Andor.
No, that's my next podcast I have to record. So 3 on the boat, and he who is dead yet lives. That sounds to me like it could be the Dark One, right? Oh, we killed him, but no, he's still around. But who came to mind, because it says boat, is Arthur Hawking. In that all of what's happened with the Shan Chan has been predicated on the fact that he's gone and dead. But what if he's lived like 1,000 years or however, like 3,000 years? It wouldn't be unheard of in this continent.
It is worth noting, we do know that he is dead because the Horn of Valir brought him back.
Oh, well then fine. I'm not going to play anymore. No. And then...
but if the Horn of Valir brings him back, dead yet lives is totally reasonable.
The great battle done, but the world not done with battle. The land divided by the return, and the guardians balance the servants, right? So that to me feels like I've been guessing at the order of operations. And what if the big battle happens between all these factions, or between the factions and the Dark One, and then the Shan Chan show up to really try to take this over, as opposed to the opposite order, which is what I mainly thought about. So the great battle, or the land divided by the return, I'm interpreting as Shan Chan. It could easily be about the Dark One returning, but that's how I'm interpreting it.
Okay, yeah.
And then future teeters on the edge of a blade just sounds to me like letting everybody know like things might go very wrong here.
Yeah, no, and I think that's totally reasonable. And I think you've hit most of the things that I would focus on without the details that I want to add, but you nailed it. A couple of things that I want to point out here is that almost every one of the phrases in here that is the something, I think is a word in the Old Tongue. Now, the lion sword, I got nothing. Maybe that is some translation of something related to Andor. But the dedicated...
Well, in the jungle, the mighty jungle,
The
the
mighty
lion
jungle.
sleeps tonight.
That could
A
be part of
weemba
it.
way, a weemba. No, I got nothing.
Okay. It's worth noting, the dedicated spear... It's worth noting the translation of Aiel is the dedicated. So I think Avienda is a very good guess about who that might be about. 3 on the boat, I got nothing for you. It's worth noting the great battle done certainly sounds to me like this is a prophecy about what happened after the battle with the Dark One as opposed to before, which would make this relatively unique among the prophecies we've gotten so far. And then we get a few phrases that I think we have heard before. The return has been translated for us in the Old Tongue as the Hyleni, which is the term that the Seanchan have used to describe their return to this continent. The Guardians, I think, probably is a term in the Old One, but we have not heard it. We do not know what it means. The Servants, on the other hand, the servants of all... in the Old Tongue translates to Aes Sedai. So I think 2 of these 3 are probably pretty likely. I think you were dead on. The return is likely the Seanchan. The servants are the Aes Sedai. And we should be paying close attention to any group that might potentially be identified as the Guardians, because they're identified in this prophecy as being the balance to the Aes Sedai.
This is just tin hat speculation, sounds like Rand's folk, right? Like they'll take on a name that translates to the Guardians. His little side project there, the school full of misfit boys.
I can't say anything about that.
Fine. I didn't want to talk to you anyway. This isn't about friendship. This is about pure podcast content.
But yeah, I think this is a really important prophecy to be keeping in mind long term, right? We've got I think you are dead on with the idea that the lion sword, the dedicated spear, and she who sees beyond feels really right for Elaine, Avienda, and Min. So 3 on a boat with he who is dead yet lives. We need to figure out who that is. And then we have this story about the world is not done with battle after the great battle. And the 3 main players are seemingly the Seanchan, the Guardians, and the Aes Sedai. And we need to figure out what the balance between them is. Keep that all in mind. My only other note here is that this is, I think, the first time that we have gotten any reference to what comes after the final battle, right? We've gotten a couple of quotations from the Fourth Age, which theoretically are from after the battle, but they have all been about the Third Age. So this is our first hint, potentially, at what comes after the battle against the Dark One. Any last thoughts here? I think the only other note that I have is about the very, very end of the chapter.
I mean, I said just it's a silly one, but the way that they're like, go back to bed, Nynaeve, like you're good, like just continues to be like they don't respect her and she can't catch a break. So again, if my theme of the night is can't we just get Nynaeve a win, even though she's an expert, told them this was going to happen, it did happen, she helped fend it off. They don't respect her anyway, so she didn't get that win.
I think that the 2 of us had exactly the same final thought, and mine just comes with like an extra dose of like tinfoil hat. Because my initial thought about this was like, oh, Anaya dismissed Nynaeve. That's weird, and that seems like a big loss for Nynaeve. But Nynaeve's last thought is, why was Anaya so upset that there wasn't a Forsaken? And this starts to get me thinking about like, is there something going on with Anaya here? Did she want there to be a Forsaken? Is she ignoring Nynaeve on a number of issues because she wants to weaken Salidar in some way? I think Tarna showing up has me worried about Red Ajah spies. I think all of the talk about the Forsaken has me worried about what was going on under cover of this bubble of evil, because we had the mystery woman on the roof a chapter ago last week. Like, there's a lot of things here that have me kind of conspiracy theorying, and Anaya is kind of the only convenient target for that. So do you think I'm crazy, or do you think that I'm taking your idea to its logical limit and she might be Black Ajah?
It sounds pretty compelling to me, and yeah, sure, I'll go along with you. I'll grab your hat and join along with you.
I'll be completely honest. I don't remember whether Anaya is Black Ajah. This could go either way.
Well, and just because you were so smart, I have to end it on a stupid thing. I'm still having so much trouble keeping track of all these different Aes Sedai because they'll pop in, like Tarna, and it's like, should I remember Tarna? Is Tarna somebody we met 3 books ago? And like, I just kind of read the scenes and appreciate the moment, and I do that here. And I'm like, I don't know if there's like a larger amount of tracking I should be doing. So it stresses me out. I know you're tracking the Aes Sedai specifically. I'm both bad at it and stressed out by how bad I am at it, which is the Greg special. Yep, that's the Greg special.
And I am doing my best, but getting slightly worse at it every week because they just keep adding Aes Sedai, y'all. They don't stop. And I know what comes next. There's even more of them.
Oh, boy.
Like all of them. So many of them. I think that's what we've got for this week. I thought this was a fun one overall. There were some hits and misses, some action scenes that we blitzed through because that's how the podcast worked. But I'm kind of left here excited to see what happens in Saladar, but kind of wondering what the next step is, because so much of these couple weeks that we've gotten in Saladar have felt like hurry up and wait. And so I'm kind of curious what the straw is that kind of sets everything in motion, because there are clearly so many plans that are waiting on something. What do you expect from this plot going forward? And then, you can preview next week, and if you want to say the name of the podcast, you're welcome to.
I mean, you kind of said this in your opening this week. I want more from this. And again, it's because my initial blush at this was like a cool rebel, like the French resistance during World War II vibe. And maybe it's just failing to play the expectations games well, but it's like, yeah, but this is so terrible, right? There's a strand going on in Star Wars television shows primarily right now about how, like, when the good guys won after Return of the Jedi, they kind of were terrible. And this is feeling more and more like that. And like, I just wanted more for these characters and for this plot line. But I think the reality is that I'm seeing that these characters need to extract themselves from these people, because these people are a mess too. I think I will be very interested to see who goes together. I mean, Elaine makes a big point of she can't leave without Tom. It feels like Suwan needs to come along as well if her plot line will continue and not just float to the top of the tank like a dead fish. I don't know. I don't have one. So I'm interested.
Trying to do that.
I'm not sure where we'll go, but I'm still interested. It just hasn't gone. It hasn't been as exciting as I hoped it would be, and so I need to come to the reality of what it is. So who knows if that will include our work next week or if we're going elsewhere. But Chapter 15 is called A Pile of Sand. Not the most thrilling. And we will read that along with Chapter 16, which is called Tellings of the Wheel. That one sounds a little more intriguing. That sounds a little bit more interesting. We will continue our journey together, and we want to again note that as you're listening to this, spoiled academics like myself are headed into our summer because it's mid-May. And so I just want to note, remember to catch up on the television show so that you can follow along with those episodes that will probably be coming your way in August.
And then watch it 10 more times. We haven't gotten a renewal notice yet.
Just leave the TV on, spinning through those episodes as often as you can, and click on all the ads where it says add this to my cart. You can just delete it from your cart later. Do you get those?
Buy 10.
No. Okay.
Support the show.
And that's it. So thanks everybody, and as always, a pleasure, Tyler. God, I just said something nice about Tyler. We got to cut this off. End it through the glass columns.
So ends another episode of Through the Glass Columns. We thank you for joining us and continuing with us on our quest to cover all of the Wheel of Time in our own sweet time.
This podcast features original content developed by Tylor Orm and Greg Cass and is not in any way affiliated with, associated with, or condoned by the Robert Jordan Estate, Tor Fantasy, Amazon, or our wives. All content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please seek out the books from your local bookshop or library and join us as we continue our journey. If you'd like to contact us to share your thoughts or give feedback, find us on Instagram or Threads by searching Through the Glass Columns.
Thank you once again for being a part of this community. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe, leave us a review wherever you are listening, and recommend this show on your social media to help us grow our community. We look forward to welcoming you back next time on Through the Glass Columns.